Hi friends, my name is Kat. Welcome to my channel, Boss Babe DIY. It is officially holiday season and I could not be more excited. I know it's super cliche, but I love everything to do with Christmas. I love baking, I love presents, I love decorating, all of it. So today I'm going to show you how I made a collapsible Christmas tree display, as well as a couple of really easy decor ideas that you can make at home for this Christmas season. So I hope you enjoy. I was commissioned for this piece by a woman and her daughter who run a local cupcake business. They needed something for all of their holiday events to display all of their cupcakes and other baked goods, but also something that they could easily transport from place to place. So I've drawn up a quick sketch here of what I ultimately want it to look like. The two vertical sides will be hinged in the middle and all of the shelves will be removable for easy storage and transportation. I'm starting out here with some 3/4 inch pine cabinet grade plywood. This is actually one piece that I had Home Depot cut down for me to fit in my car, since my car is just too small to get a full 4x8 sheet in. Most box stores do this free of charge. You just have to ask and they'll cut it down to the measurements you give them. They do usually give a disclaimer that the cuts they do may not be exactly precise. So what I like to do is I like to have them cut an inch or two larger than what I actually need. That way I can fit it in my car and it's manageable, and then when I get home I can make the actual precise cuts that I need. But it still makes it a lot easier to handle, especially since I do these projects mostly on my own. Since this tree has such a unique design, I'm going to be doing all of my cuts with my circular saw and my jigsaw. I'm going to start by cutting my two side pieces. First, I'm marking out the width and the height of my full piece. Instead of trying to find one long straight edge to connect those pieces, I decided to use this chalk line. These are really easy to use. I found this one for under $10 at Home Depot. Since my chalk line doesn't have a flat edge to hook onto, I'm just temporarily tacking in a nail right at the mark where my width is, wrapping the chalk line around it. Then I'll take the other end of my chalk line down to my second mark. Once I get the string nice and lined up, I'll pull everything taut and then snap the line, leaving behind a nice blue chalk line that I can use as a guide while I'm cutting. Sometimes when I'm making long cuts like this with my circular saw, I'll try to attach a straight edge next to the saw just to ensure that my cut is exactly straight. But since this is freestanding, I decided to trust my free hand on this one, and honestly it turned out just fine. Now for the second side of my tree, we'll call it side B, I decided to get a little clever. I used side A as a template for side B instead of trying to measure it freehand. This way I know they're exactly the same height and width that I need. Now you may be thinking, wait a minute, didn't she say this thing was going to be hinged? Won't it be super flimsy if they're both the exact same size? I had the same thought too, so worry not. What I'm doing is I'm actually using that first line that I've marked and then tracing the width of side A onto side B, so that when I do put hinges on this, once it opens up, side A will butt up perfectly against side B and won't be able to open up any further than I need it to go. Now it's time for me to mark out where each of my shelves needs to sit. I've calculated exactly how far apart these shelves need to be so that they all have an equal height. As you can see, I've got my shelves all marked out, and at the top of the screen you can just see where I've got that line marked where side A will butt up against side B. Next, I'm squaring off my markings so that the shelves sit just inside that angled edge. Next, I measured out the depth of each of my shelves based on these markings. Typically, I would do all of these measurements beforehand, but since, again, this was such a weird design, I kind of reverse engineered it. So I cut out my main shape first, then made my markings based on that, and then took exact measurements so that my shelves would fit perfectly. All right, here comes the part where I get really creative. Any of you who watched my last video when I worked on the coat closet with shiplap know that I struggled with a curved window that they had. I tried to freehand a compass on the ground and that did not work out. So this time I thought, since I want this to be so precise, I would create a jig of my own design. So what I've done here is I've just taken some pieces of scrap 3/4 inch plywood that I had left over from my initial cuts, and I'm creating a little 90-degree frame for my pieces to sit in. I found another piece of scrap plywood to be the arm of my compass. I made a mark here where I want the pivot point of my compass arm to land. Then I measured the exact center of my compass arm and drew a line all the way down the middle. I wanted to create a little space between the arm of my compass and the surface that I would be marking onto, so I attached this little scrap piece of 1/4 inch plywood here right at the pivot point. It also creates this nice little wedge for all of my pieces to sit in while I'm marking them. Next, I marked the corner on my scrap piece so that I'd know exactly where to drill the pilot hole for my pivot point. Try to say that 10 times fast. The last thing to do was attach the arm and hope and pray that this thing actually works. Thank the mathematician gods, it actually swivels. Yeah! Okay, I said that was the last step, but of course I need to mark out where I actually need my pencil to go. I'm using those measurements I took earlier to mark the depth of each of my shelves. For all of you math nerds out there, this would be the radius of your circle. In this case, we're only doing a 1/4 circle, but same theory applies. Next, I needed to drill out a hole at each of those markings for my pencil to fit through. I found a bit that's just larger than my pencil so that it can sit in there snugly without wiggling around too much. What I'm doing here is I'm actually pre-drilling for my pre-drill. Since the final bit that I'm using is so large, they have a tendency to kind of jump around if you just try to go into a smooth surface. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a smaller drill bit and drill a pilot hole for that larger bit to sit into. That way when I go back, I know it's going to sit exactly where it needs to, and I don't have to worry about it skipping around or splitting the wood. Now that I've got my holes drilled, it's time to fit the pencil. I've got a tiny piece of 1/4 inch scrap ply to mimic the height that I've got at my pivot point. And then I'm just tying a rubber band around my pencil to mark that height. Now that my jig is finally complete, all that's left is to use it. And wouldn't you know, my measurement is exactly right. I know that seems like a lot of work just to get 6 shelves marked out, but it was so helpful, and honestly, I'm really proud of how it turned out for just having made it up on the fly out of scraps I had in my basement. Once I had all of my shelves marked out, I just used my jigsaw to cut around all of those curved edges. And just like that, I've got all 6 of my shelves cut out and ready to go. I've just got one last thing to do to my side pieces before I test fit this whole thing together. The client requested I cut a hole at the back of each shelf for them to be able to feed any electrical cords through if they need to. So I'm just using the edge of this can as a template for me to cut these pieces out with my jigsaw. Now it's time to assemble this baby. I've gone ahead and marked out where I want my hinges to go, but I want to avoid drilling all the way through my plywood and ruining the other side of my piece. So instead of just guessing, I use a piece of painter's tape to mark the depth at which I want my drill bit to stop. That way I avoid accidentally messing up my piece altogether. And here's that little trick in action. I can see exactly when that piece of painter's tape hits the surface of my piece, so I know when to stop drilling. Now I just have to attach my hinges and hope that this thing works the way I see it in my head. At this point, you may be wondering why I'm going ahead and attaching these pieces before I paint it green. And the answer is I want to make sure that everything fits together nice and snugly, and I can get my holes drilled for all of my shelf pins to go in first. Then I'm going to take it all apart and paint everything individually. At this point, I brought my stand inside so I could work on a level surface while I was marking out where I needed my shelf pins to go. And of course, it's important to take a dance break from time to time because this is supposed to be fun. But the boss informed me it was time to get back to work. Once I ensured that everything was level, I used my speed square to mark out where I wanted all of my pins to go. Each shelf will have 2 pins on either side that will be removable. I used this scrap piece of wood to test out the holes for my brackets to sit in. Now the back of the box suggested using a certain size of drill bit, but I found when I drilled that size hole, the pins fit in so snugly they were really difficult to get back out, which is what you would normally want, but since I want them to be removable, I used a drill bit that was a 32nd of an inch larger, which allowed the pins to still sit snugly in these holes, but are much easier to remove. And I'm using that same tape method that I used before to set the depth of these pinholes. I actually had to end up re-drilling the holes for all of the outermost pins to be as close to that angled edge as possible, because I found that once I fit the shelves in, they had a tendency to kind of tip forward because they were out of balance. But I ended up filling those original holes in with some wood filler. Now the last thing to do before painting is get this whole thing sanded down. I started with a 120 grit sandpaper and finished everything with a 220 grit to get the surface nice and smooth for the paint to go on evenly. Of course, I wanted to give this tree a nice Christmassy feel, so I used my favorite Behr Ultra Scuff Defense. I think this color is actually called Festive Green, so I figured it was pretty appropriate. Before I started painting, I wiped down all of my pieces with a tack cloth just to make sure I captured any dust left over from sanding. And then I used a 1/2 inch nap roller to paint all of my surfaces. I ended up needing 3 coats for all of my pieces.
I really like this paint because it goes on really smoothly and it dries this nice matte color. And like it says in the name, it has this kind of built-in scuff defense. Since I knew this was going to be getting a lot of traffic and it would be moved around a lot, I wanted to use a paint that I knew was going to be durable and last for many holiday seasons to come. Now all that's left to do is to put this thing back together. But before I show you the final product, I want to show you those quick decor items that I promised you at the beginning of this video. The first craft I'm going to show you is a simple paper star. Now you'll start by cutting out a rectangle from your favorite craft paper. I cut mine about 24 inches by 12 inches. You'll start at one of the shorter ends, folding in about an inch, and then you'll flip your paper over and fold back over that same inch. You'll continue to fold and flip until you get all the way to the end of your piece of paper. Once you get to the end, you'll want to cut off any excess you have left over. The one thing you do need to ensure is that both of your end pieces face the same direction. You can see here that both of mine are facing up. Next, you'll want to grab a piece of ribbon or twine to tie around the middle of your piece of paper. Now, a tiny piece of this will show at the end, so I always like to go for something festive. Once you've got your knot tied, you cut off any excess string that you have. Then you'll fold your entire piece in half. You can adjust your ribbon to find the exact midpoint of your star. Once your piece is folded in half, you can cut off the edges to give it a decorative look. This is kind of like a paper snowflake. You can really do whatever you like. I decided to go for a triangle. You can see this star starting to shape up. Unfold the edges of your star until they meet the opposite edge. Then you can secure them together using a stapler or any kind of craft glue. I chose a stapler because frankly I'm a little impatient. Now you just flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. And voila! You've got a beautiful Christmas-inspired paper star. You can make these in all shapes and sizes, in any paper you want. You can add them to garland, your tree, or your mantle. Plus, they're an easy handmade craft you can do with any member of the family. Now, since I've gone ahead and shown you how to make a large Christmas tree, I thought I'd show you how to make a small one as well. For this craft, you'll need a styrofoam cone, your favorite festive yarn, and a low-heat hot glue gun. You'll start by tacking down one end of your yarn perpendicular to the top of your styrofoam cone. Then you'll put a bead of glue around the entire top of your styrofoam cone and wrap your yarn around to secure it to the very top. Then it's pretty much just a matter of wrapping your yarn all the way around your styrofoam cone. You can do this in a pattern or completely randomly. It all kind of depends on the type of yarn that you decide to use. The one thing I would suggest though is every once in a while putting a dot of hot glue on just to make sure that it gets secured in place. And then you'll keep wrapping and gluing and wrapping and gluing and wrapping until you get all the way to the bottom of your cone. Once you do get to the bottom of the cone, you'll repeat exactly what you did at the top by putting a bead of glue all the way around and securing your yarn. Once that's secure, you'll work your way all the way back up to the top of the cone, doing the same thing you did before. Once you get back to the top of the tree, you can either cover that exposed styrofoam with a pom-pom or something else decorative to top your tree, or you can do what I did here and you can glue the rest of your yarn in a spiral pattern around until all of that styrofoam is covered up. Once you can no longer see any styrofoam peeking through, just cut off any excess yarn. And now's the fun part. Just like decorating your tree at home, you can decorate your craft tree however you want. I decided to use these tiny little pom-poms because I thought they looked like snowballs. But you can do ribbon, sequins, glitter, the sky's really the limit on this thing. Use your creativity, have fun with your family, and make some really cute handcrafted items to decorate your house for Christmas. And here's my finished, one-of-a-kind handmade yarn Christmas tree. Now that I've got my decorations done, it's finally time to show you how everything looks all together. Here's that beautiful Christmas tree display stand all decked out and ready for the season. I love how much depth these paper stars give to this whole display. They're so clearly homemade, but they have such a professional look to them. And of course, our handmade Christmas trees. I ended up making a couple more trees with some twine and other yarn I had laying around, and I just love how much fun they bring to this whole display. I'll definitely be adding these to my yearly decor. This collapsible Christmas tree display stand with removable shelves turned out so well. I hope it helps my clients sell all of their baked goods this holiday season, and many more to come.
Thanks so much for watching today, guys. I hope I gave you some inspiration to make some decor this holiday season. Have a happy and safe holiday. Hi. Hey. Stop. Stop it. It's up or down. You don't get to come in and out. Thanks so much for watching today, guys. I hope I gave you a little inspiration to... Excuse you. Oh my God, you're killing me, kitten. Excuse you? What? No, no. Oh, I hope you enjoy. And I hope you didn't ruin my shot, you little monster. Yes, I will. I love you too. Hey. Meowie Christmas.